Rod, I think you're still muted here.
Now we got the unmute button. Can you hear me now? Yes? Good.
Yep, you're good.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Rod Moraga, and I am the chairperson for the Colorado Prescribed Fire Council. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about us. This meeting, if our numbers are correct, is the highest attendance we've had for anything we've done so far. So at least on paper, according to Daniel, we have at least 170 people that have signed up for this. And so that is excellent and really speaks to how important this topic is to folks, and you know, that we are here to hopefully give you some of the tools that you'll need to move forward this year and in continuing years. So I wanted to talk to a little bit about the council itself. Our mission is to provide a unified voice for land managers and other supporters of prescribed fire to advocate and promote the increased, appropriate, safe, and legal use of prescribed fire as a natural resource management tool. And as part of that, we tried to provide information and resources to ensure that your prescribed fire projects are done to the highest standard. And I think we all know that there's a lot of scrutiny that is around prescribed burning, and that we all collectively have to do our best to do the job that is been put upon us as a huge responsibility. So education and training events are provided. We're trying to use the best science and give practical guidance. So we're there to help with any roadblocks that might be stopping you from implementing. And we want to make sure that everyone has the best possible opportunity to continue using prescribed fire as a land management tool. So that's the council. We have a website. It's coprescribedfire.org. And there's an opportunity there to contact us if you like. And it has some information about us, and also has, when possible, you know, interesting topics and forums and so on that might be something that can help you. So that's a little bit about us as a whole, and we hope to see more participation from folks. So I wanted to talk a little bit before we get going. You know, the last fire season was unprecedented again, and I believe we're going to continue to see that pattern. And you know, with that, obviously last year was a huge challenge, as we've all experienced for many different reasons. But in terms of the fire season, I think that the attention put forth on all these wildfires, was all about the destruction. And you know, the media has a way of using adjectives that make it sound like everything has been destroyed and this evil monster has, you know, gobbled up the earth. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, it always bothers me when they use these superlative adjectives of destruction about fire, because as all of us hopefully know, and why we're here, is that fire is an extremely important process, and that, you know, it turns out we need more, not less fire. And that's a hard message to get across during wildfire season, and certainly last year's season, where we saw so much, loss of homes and property, and of course lives as well. And so it's difficult, and it's not the right time to talk about it. But after the fires is the right time to talk about it, and it's an opportunity for all of us as practitioners, and those of you with agencies, to get that message out, that the value that prescribed fire brings in helping to reduce all of this devastation from wildfires is critically important, and that what we need to do is take advantage and see if we can find those stories of success. And that's what I would really encourage all of you to do if you haven't done so already. I personally, here locally, we had the Cowwood fire in Boulder, and immediately a bunch of us jumped on looking at all the mitigation and prescribed burning that we have done over the years, right where that fire burned. And you know, we're trying to quantify that into different types of educational outreach, you know, some more scientific, some more real simple, and hopefully distribute that so that people can see firsthand why we need prescribed burning. So I encourage all of you to do that, because I know all over Colorado that was the case, where the fire was slowed or changed intensities, et cetera, depending on what it was burning through. So I think we're all hopefully on that page and working towards that. And if you don't have the means to do that, that is something you can reach out to us for, and maybe we can help you put together some resources to capture that. The other thing I think we need to remember as we're going into 21 here is that, you know, that last fire season really took a toll. It took a toll on firefighters. You know, the cumulative fatigue factor, just the sheer amount of day after day of you know, having to try and get our hands around some of these fires that were just absolutely impressive in their intensities, and you know, our little puny humans could not stop it, and we just had to accept a lot of days were just for me at least, I know we were, you know, doing a lot of just evacuations and point protection when possible, and you know, had to really step back from anything more than that, and you know, that takes a toll on you, and mentally it beats on firefighters, because we're all sort of geared to, you know, be the heroes, go in there and put the fires out, and that just really wasn't the case last year. But the other part of this is the communities. The communities were impacted. The local communities were impacted, and communities very, very far away were impacted. Smoke was a huge topic last year, and rightfully so. And we had some very significant smoke impacts. And so, of course, you take those and you move into the prescribed fire season, and we got to be aware and sensitive to the public's concerns. They are going to be very weary of seeing more fire on the ground. They're going to be very weary of the air quality issues that are going to be involved in that, and you know, the risk of an escape. Those are real concerns, and we need to use all the tools available to us to do good planning, to be ready for implementation. We have to be prepared to support our actions with good science. It's just not enough to just say, you know, what's that saying we always have, you know, pay now, pay later. You know, that doesn't really wash with the public anymore, and it's really not appropriate. We have to be able to explain ourselves in a manner that they can understand, and again, with good science to back us, and to be able to feel confident that we are trying to do the right thing for the right reasons. And you know, the other thing that has to change is that it's not enough to educate our public. We have to collaborate with our public. We have to collaborate with our communities. We have to recognize that there may be reasons why it's just not the right time to put smoke in the air. And it's, you know, it's not just us saying, well, we know the right window to burn. It's the community saying, hey, we've got A, B, or C coming up, and the last thing we want is our air shed completely impacted. You know, and those are fair requests, and so we have to work together, because you know, we're all one here, and so we have to do this the best way possible. So as part of that, today we have a workshop. We will provide these workshops as we are able to. You know, the COVID obviously sort of hindered us on having a in-person meeting, but it turns out this is a much better turnout. So you know, we as a council meet quarterly at a minimum. We have a steering committee, and so as these ideas come to you about other topics for workshops and so on, please get them to us, and we will continue to try to build something. But today's workshop is actually got a couple of good topics that I'm excited to hear about, and so we're going to start moving into that now. And Daniel, I'll throw it back to you to introduce the first speaker. Thank you.
Thanks, Rod. So up next, we have Jimmy White, and he'll be talking about Cameron Peak and how it interacted with the prescribed fire work that they've been doing on the Arapahoe Roosevelt. Jimmy White's been working up here in Northern Colorado for a very long time, and I'm not going to tell him just how long he's been working up here, but long enough. And he's been doing a lot of great collaborative work up here. And I'm going to turn it over to him. And I think Ty is going to be able to present his presentation. So looks like I'm seeing that, Ty. So that's looking great. And Jimmy, to you.
Thanks, Daniel. You able to hear me?
Loud and clear. Thank you.
Wait. I had to do the run through the household and ask everybody to reduce bandwidth so that I can hopefully stay on. But if I drop off, I suspect almost anybody can pick up with my presentation. So good morning. I still working on the Arapahoe Roosevelt National Forest and Pawnee National Grassland, and in a prescribed fire and fuel specialist position now. Spent last couple of years as an FMO, and I guess had the opportunity, and I'll leave it at that, as working through the Cameron Peak fire from start to nearly finish. So with that, might as well just go ahead and get started, because I think the questions at the end, whenever that ends up being, are probably the most valuable. So I'll be touching on some interactions that I either personally witnessed or looked at and discussed with others who were on the incident. Interactions with Cameron Peak and some of the fuels implementation activities that we did, and primarily focusing in on the broadcast burning. So with that, this first slide is just a smoke column, because I know we just touched on that, but smoke column on the left is from Cameron Peak, from Red Feather, as the fire was making its advancement in early September towards that community. And then on the right is one of our broadcast burn smoke columns. Now, I do have to say that the angle of the imagery always makes things either look worse or better. So next slide, please. Yep, as I mentioned, so August 13th, Cameron Peak started up on high, right at nearly a tree line there by Cameron Pass, just north of that. And it took 10 teams, 112 days to get, I can't say to get around it, but to get through it. And I want to mainly note the two major spread events, the first one being on the September 6th and 7th. And you'll see that there was a significant run followed up by 8 to 12 inches of snow across the fire. And then the subsequent one was a 17-mile run, obviously higher gust wind speeds, and then followed up also by snow. But even at that point, in October, the fire wasn't done. So I just want to point out those two events, and I'll be focusing in primarily on the first one. All right, next slide. So Rod mentioned the unprecedented nature of last year, and the ERCs and BI highlight that. You can see here on the left side with our BI chart that we've got new record-setting trends well above the 97th percentile, and then subsequently a significant drop, which that indicates obviously the snow event. And then further on down the line, out in October, you see yet another significant record-breaking event, and then subsequent drop again to identify that snow event. We stopped at the end of November tracking a lot of these indices, but it's something to consider going through the year. So as we go into burn windows, you can kind of calibrate that with either benign or awful fire seasons that we may have. On the right-hand side is from the incident meteorologist on Cameron Peak for the 6th, just showing what some of the indices that they had identified as being critical or of concern, primarily really the ridge winds and humidities, Haynes index, and then of course the existing fuels condition as depicted under the BI. And ERC chart is very similar. So then let's see, we'll go on to the next slide. So this is going to be a video. It's about 3.5 minutes long, and I'll try to narrate as best I can what's going on. But it'll go through a process of kind of depicting some of the fuels treatment approaches we've taken in the past, our new intended strategy, and then how the Cameron Peak from a 60,000 foot perspective, how it might have reacted to some of our treatments. Now, I do want to preface this with much of this is not yet scientifically proven. And I agree that science is definitely the foundation in which we need to both build off of and also to support under some of our observations. And really, all of my observations here are just from myself and from others that I trust on the line. So Tyler, if you don't mind starting the video. So it's about 3 minutes long, but here, this is just a depiction of more of the southern portion of our national forest. The green kind of scatter shot depicts the fuels treatment areas that have been treated. And we refer to this a bit like random acts of restoration. We're taking opportunity of the landscape and our planning efforts, but many of these treatments aren't interconnected. This next portion just highlights some of the larger fire footprints. Starting at the bottom is Fern Lake, then towards the bottom right is the U-shaped one is Bobcat, and then of course Hyde Park being that larger footprint. And those will all come into play here as we see the fire progression over the landscape. And so with this, this kind of inspired us to look at joining up our units, really following up with broadcast burning as the final treatment to reach our desired regime or condition. And that blue or green line there represents what we call the ribbon. And so we had started that effort. These light blue polygons are our burn treatments that have been completed. And there's kind of that ribbon that we're depicting. And you notice that as you get halfway down the screen there, that there's very little connectivity. So the fire starts here in the bright red on August 19th. It sort of gets chalked up in a lot of our wilderness areas. Really not a whole lot of opportunity to get after it anywhere. And you can just see that over the next 15 days or so, it's really just kind of chunking its way and getting well established in multiple high elevation lodgepole, spruce, fir landscapes. So on the 6th, it made a huge push, and you can see the first interaction there is with our bighorn sheep burn. And then of course it ran into the Dad Bennett prescribed fire, pushed into the previous 2012 Hyde Park fire. And at this point, you'll see that the front gets narrowed down and really is just pointed at the Elkhorn 4 prescribed burn that I believe Gabe is going to be speaking to later on. But with that head being necked down so much, we really had a great opportunity to grab it there up north. But you can see down south where there was hardly any treatment and definitely not anything that of scope and scale. it just went all the way to essentially the plains. So we now have a fire progression, started at tree line, made it all the way almost to Horsetooth Reservoir. And really the only location, whether or not this is fate or there's some scientific rationale behind it, made it all to the plains. So just it gives you kind of that 30,000 foot perspective, and begs the question, how much influence did our prior treatments actually have? Okay, we'll go to the next slide, please. Oop. Okay. So in that video, I just pulled out segments. You can see this first interaction, and I tried to explain it there. The Bighorn RX, I put down how many years ago it had been treated, and the dead Bennett there is at 17 years. So a fairly significant time frame. As the fire pushed eastward, you know, how much of it actually got hung up in the Dad Bennett burn as a result of the burn's sake or not, we're still, you know, definitely looking into, because that's quite a spread, 15-year spread there between the two different burns. But of note that Bighorn sheep burn, it really did, and this is field verified by the divisions and the field ops folks, that the fire essentially was split in two at that point and broken out into what we were calling the thumb, which is that northern flank there. With this, well, we'll go ahead and go on to the next slide. So one of the complaints and one of the interesting phenomenons when you're out there doing burning is that you will get sometimes pushback from the public as to how things look. This is a drone image of the burn still under implementation. It's nearing its end. We received snow shortly thereafter. You can see that we used the aspect burning, the snow on the north aspect, which is to the upper right of that screenshot. And then, of course, our southern aspect carried fire with no problem in February. On the right-hand side, you can see per the progression map, how much it pushed into the burn itself. Now, I do have to say that progression maps are difficult to utilize at times because they are timestamps, and they're always interested in the maximum extent of the burn perimeter or the fire perimeter. And when we do our broadcast burning, especially in a case like this, we'd had no handline or direct control feature at the top of the hill. And so we burned it into the snow. And so the actual footprint of the burn and of the fire footprint are almost identical. And you can kind of see how there's some overlap. But one of the things I wanted to touch on is that whole idea of, you know, pay now or pay later. One of the greatest complaints was we were killing all the trees on the hillside. And now this is one of the very few places left in the canyon that still have an overstory ponderosa pine stand intact. Okay, next slide. Here is just a little bit of imagery on both the column, kind of giving you a sense of the fire's intensity as it hit that burn unit. And then on the left-hand side is the fire effects upstream, so which would have been prior to impacting. And although it's probably hard to see in detail, there's really nothing left on that southern aspect. All of the overstory is gone. And you can see that the fire made it all the way out to Highway 14 and burned through willow patches in the riparian area. So just an example of how dry it was last year. And we'll move on to the next slide. So the second interaction is with our elkhorn prescribed burn. The implementation was about 450 acres and it happened the spring of last year. So it only had one growing season on it. The advantage that we had with this particular footprint is that the town of Rustic that you see at the bottom right corner of the left image is not too far and definitely downstream of the advancing Cameron Peak fire. The Elkhorn footprint allowed us to at night do a burnout operation from the road there to the left of that yellow prescribed fire footprint, and allow that to take up space and close up that southern aspect of the canyon to buy us time to do further structure protection and get in place in the town of Rustic. So again, as the progression maps will show, this completely burned over. You drive up there now, and there are still trees left as a result of prescribed burning versus wildfire. Again, you know how much this had in effect of the easterly progression, and gave us opportunity. Those are all stories to be told, and some records maybe, and hopefully this can be further teased out. But I can't tell you that night that we were down there, really under a highly stressful situation, trying to save some of the structures along Highway 14, to know that our fire that night with winds was not going to, advance further down. We'll go to the next slide. So this third interaction is probably the most notable for me. Again, I was there and watched as the fire progressed, crossed over the contingency line that the teams had put in place along the Pingree Park and Manhattan roads, and witnessed literally the fire crossing the roads and complete, sustained ground runs on the eastern side of their containment features. The fire, and the next slide will depict that, but the fire really, the intensities just went away. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it really narrowed down. Even if you can't get full connectivity between the units, it really narrows down that frontal assault by the fire and gives you an opportunity to take advantage of that. Now, there are a plethora of other treatments in this area, those that were done manually, mechanically, a lot of work that was done along in the Ben Della Tour Scout Ranch on the Shambhala Mountain Center. And then, as I had mentioned, that Elkhorn 4 broadcast burn unit, all of those in series, there was only 10 of us on that front when it came through, and the fire behavior just really dropped. So I was super excited to see what happened there. And then just south of that arrow on the right image, there's a longer unit. That's a Dad Bennett burn. That's on the southern side of 14, and it kind of also shows you that it split the head of that fire that night and forced it into the Hyde Park burn, or Hyde Park fire scar. Okay, next slide. So here I just tried to give an example of what I witnessed as far as the fire's movement. You can see that Elkhorn burn there on that far left of the image, and then the fire went up and around, came down 7 Mile drainage, and then when it impacted the Pingree Park burn there on the right in the yellow, it moved back up to the ridge line there on Winterstein Park, and then proceeded easterly. And so again, if you get down to the nitty gritty, and the next slide will show this, but the fire progression didn't actually make it as far into the burn. Yeah, that's just the tools we have. So, and that's not really what's important. In my mind, it's that 60,000 foot, how did the overall fire's progression possibly be manipulated by the burns? Okay, we'll move on to the next one. So here is an image post wildfire in the fall. The left one just showing you sort of the overall canopy density remaining of live standing. And then on the right, if you look pretty closely, you can see the blackened front that came into the grass, but then by the time it hits the left side of that image, so a few hundred yards, it has gone out. And the fire behavior there on that northern aspect, essentially all of those trees have been torched. And so you know that there was a fair bit of energy at the time that it hit that. So it just sort of reinforced the power of prescribed fire. And I'll describe on the next slide some of the considerations that I have in my mind. So we'll head on to the next slide, please. So just some closing thoughts. You know, these are all anecdotal observations. I think I've stressed that, but I want to re-stress it. I know that there are others that are working specifically on this question. How effective are our treatments and of what type of treatment? The second point is refraining from confirmation bias. I can get pretty excited talking about this and knowing what I saw, but you know, confirmation bias can be dangerous, and we don't want to sound like we're not taking the time to really understand what the overall benefits of our treatments are, because it ultimately is costing the public money, clear days at times when we do our broadcast burning, and just peace of mind, right? There's a risk transfer potential. And then this third bullet is how long treatments will remain effective. I think that's something I'm very interested in. I'm fairly certain that recently burned units are highly effective. Not so convinced that after 10 years, you're actually buying what you think you have. And then scale must be commensurate. I think a mile wide or a mile in extent is the minimum that you need for anything like Cameron Peak. And as we know, how can you plan for something when we continue to break records? What is the maximum fire behavior that we are actually going to see? Kind of scary, since it jumped the Continental Divide this year. And then we have a lot of work ahead, whether or not it's on the scientific side or on the implementation side. Definitely, it requires us to continue to be committed. I'm super excited to see the growth of the Colorado Prescribed Fire Council and its participation and the variety of folks that are at the table. So thank you, and that closes the presentation. Thanks, Tyler.
Awesome. Thank you, Jimmy. That was excellent. We have one question in the chat box. And if anybody else has any other questions while he's answering this, please go ahead and pop those in now. Rebecca Samolsky with Fire Deputy Colorado asks, I'm wondering to what extent the mapping of prior fuels treatments were operationalized by the management teams. Did these treatments on the landscape become part of the strategy, specifically using those areas with more aerial or ground support to build lines?
So I don't know if there's a short answer to that, having gone through 10 management teams and the various response by each one of them. The forest did make a pretty significant effort to share that, package it up into a workbook so that each team could take that and develop off of it as best they can. I would say, just as a general summarization from my perspective last year, that it's still something that there's some hesitancy to adopt because of that idea of confirmation bias and the idea that maybe the local units don't really know what they're dealing with, because this fire is unprecedented, right? It's more than two times what we've dealt with before. That said, there are definitely folks out there at different positions on the teams and even the ICs that are starting to understand that it's extremely valuable to bring that knowledge to the table. And even sharing what National Weather Service had done for us for Wind Ninja runs for our burns in that area, gave that to the meteorologists and the fire behavior analysts to help them better hopefully predict. All of that information can be extremely valuable, and receptivity is just up to the team and what their focus is. You know, what's interesting, and I know this is a long answer, but the teams will come from various regions. They'll have a lot of different expertise with a lot of different vegetation and fuel types. And that in and of itself can determine what their comfort level is with taking on some of the local units prior treatments and word basically of saying that, yes, this is much more likely to work than the road. We know that roads have a tough time working around here unless we do something with them, like the pods concept and potential operational delineations and building those roads out with fuels treatments.
Awesome. Yeah, great answer, Jimmy. Thank you very much. Looks like Brian Keating's got a quick answer. And then we have up next, Lisa Kriederman with National Weather Service Boulder. She's going to be providing a seasonal update as it relates to wildland fire, both planned and unplanned. And I'm going to pass this off to you. As a reminder, everybody, if you have any questions, please leave them in the chat box. And at the end of this, we'll be providing a form for you to provide feedback for us on these presentations. And if you please fill that out, it should also be in the email that you received from Eventbrite. And for our speakers, just as a reminder, as you get up onto the edge of your time, Ty will be playing a little sonar ping off of her phone that'll go bang. So listen for that in the background so that you're not that person that goes over the line. I think we have a bunch of great speakers today, but we've all seen that where someone just gets so excited about their topic that they're into the long-winded mode. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Lisa and thank Jimmy again for his presentation today.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Okay.
Loud and clear. Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you. And thank you to the coalition for inviting me to present the outlook for this season. And let me share my screen. Okay, can everyone see that PowerPoint? Okay, good. Let me put that into, okay. So just starting out real quick. Hi, I am Lisa Kriederman. I'm the Fire Weather Program Manager and an incident meteorologist out of the National Weather Service here in Boulder. So I'm in one of the offices of about 3 that cover Colorado, but I'll do an overview over the whole state to look at the seasonal outlook that we have. Let's see, just want to bring up that this week is the Flood Safety and Wildfire Awareness Week. You can go to any of the Colorado National Weather Service offices web pages, and there'll be a news headline like the one circled up top, and it can bring you to just the topics that we have that we're going to be covering each day, whether it's about floods or wildfires, and also touching on, you know, the potential for those floods due to those burn scars, burn footprints, whatever we want to call them. So yeah, I welcome you to go and check that out on those websites for this week. So to go through the outline I have, I'm just going to briefly touch on the preceding conditions that we are going into this year with. We'll also look into the area ERCs, just the data that I have been able to find, not claiming to be fuel specialist, but just to kind of wrap everything together. We'll also look at the ENSO forecast, what we're in right now and what we're forecast to go into. And then we'll take a look at those temperature and precipitation outlooks, what the drought outlook looks like, and then we'll wrap it up with the GAC significant wildland fire potential outlook. So as James described, last year, it was an unprecedented year. And the very interesting thing to look at is we started last year with not too much drought covering the state. But then, and another thing to notice is back in 2019, we had little to no, it was the first time since the drought monitor had started that the state of Colorado had absolutely no drought status in it at all, covering 0%. So it was quite interesting that we got so terrible so quickly. One of the factors last year was the second year in a row, if not a little bit more, but we pretty much had 2 years in a row with just a monsoon season that just did not show up. The expected precipitation, that quenching of the fuels with, that little boost of precipitation, we just didn't see that. And so that quickly got that drought to cover us even further and the drought conditions to worsen quite quickly. Looking at what we're in for El Nino, we just entered into a neutral and then into a La Nina phase beginning of last year. And when you look at El Nino and La Nina phases, El Nino tends to last about a year or less, whereas La Nina tends to last a little bit longer, 1 to 3 years actually, is kind of how often that occurs. So, and I'll go into what the forecast is going to be, but just overall in Colorado, it's hard to pick out the effects of what El Nino or La Nina has. It's so subtle. And, just 1 or 2 storms can really turn it around. But generally on the east side of the Rocky Mountains, we tend to get a little more downslope and we tend to get warmer on the east side in La Nina patterns. Whereas Northwest Colorado is a little cooler, especially during the winter time, may see a little bit more precipitation. But that is very, very, very general. We don't have strong signals of what will happen here in the state due to El Nino or La Nina. Then I wanted to kind of look at to kind of match up the drought monitor across the state of Colorado with these El Nino cycles, El Nino or La Nina, and then just kind of picking out, our bigger fire years of 2002 here. I mean, yeah, we were coming out of a long period of La Nina in the blue. And then when we're in El Nino, it's in that red. So we were coming out of a long period of La Nina going into an El Nino. And then if we look at 2012, we were coming out of a long La Nina going into weak El Nino. And then going into 2018, it wasn't that long period of La Nina. We were kind of in a neutral phase for quite a while. So the interesting thing is that just this past year, we were in this weak El Nino period for quite a long time. And then we dipped down into La Nina throughout the course of the year. And then just tying that down into the percent area of drought over the entire state of Colorado. You have this, we started with not much here in 2001, and then we ramped up quickly into that drought status, going into all the way to D4 here in that dark maroon color for 2002. And 2012, we did have quite a bit of area of drought in 2011, and then it got substantially worse in 2012, 2013. Going into 2018, kind of the same thing, how we didn't have much drought, but then we really ramped up in 2018. And then here's that spot in 2019 where we went down to 0% for several weeks of no drought in the state of Colorado. And then we had this El Nino pattern, and now we're dipping down with the La Nina, and then our drought is just really ramping up. So I'm not saying there's a conclusion with this, or it's definitely pointing a certain way, but I just wanted to kind of show those two indices and kind of see where we came from and where we might be heading. But it was a really interesting feature of just this last year, because we went from no drought at all to quickly, our year of the 3 biggest wildfires on record and a lot of high temperature records broken. So just kind of an interesting look at the El Nino cycle, the global circulation, and the drought here, and kind of our big fire years. So here I just wanted to look at where we're coming into what the state has seen in terms of precipitation. So the left-hand graph looking at October and through the rest of the year, December 31st of last year, definitely looking at some negatives of what we normally see in precipitation, except in the central mountains of Colorado. But across the plains, across western Colorado, definitely not seeing what we should in that period of time. And then going into January, we did have some relief out on the eastern plains and into the Palmer Divide, couple spotty areas over here, but overall, I would say, there is quite a bit of deficit across the state. And then here over in February, we see that, that storm, that upslope storm we had, and it gave us a lot of good precipitation in that month to hopefully, quell any of the drought. But unfortunately, it's still quite dry, just because we have been in this long period of not seeing close to the normal precipitation across the state. And then I just wanted to add, that storm that we had just a few days ago. So it did bring some good precipitation again to the eastern plains of Colorado, but still very dry just in this week time frame across most of the rest of the state. So looking at since October 1st, so we're looking at just the water year, we still see a lot of area of, seeing a deficit in the normal amount, the average amount of precipitation that we should be seeing for this period of year. The exception is being down here in the central mountains, down in the Sangre de Cristos and down south. And what we're seeing now in terms of soil effects, this is looking at the entire month of February and looking at the anomaly of calculated soil moisture. So still seeing quite a bit of drought, quite a bit of a deficit in that soil moisture across the state. Looking at the current the snow water equivalent percentage of normal, I've seen it a lot worse than this at this time of year, but just knowing what we've kind of come from, and then we're gonna head into what ENSO cycle that we're going to go into, I'm not thinking that it's going to be any sort of savior or anything, but we do have a pretty good snowpack for this time of year, seeing that we have, basically 90% or above out here, but not up to 100%, right? Nothing over 100%. And then out here on the western side, it's a little bit drier in the 80% range. So not terrible, but yeah, we still just need that moisture to come through the rest of this winter season to help with the snowpack in those higher elevations anyway. Now, this is just some of the data. I found there was a lot of missing data. So these are 4 of the ones I could find. So we have the ERC graph here of the Northern Front Range Mountains here, the Northern Front Range foothills here, Sangre de Cristos down here, and then San Juan Mountains, the Western San Juan Mountains. So overall, kind of looking pretty average, at least from January 1st. The one exception would be the Front Range foothills. And again, kind of when we're in this La Nina pattern, having that be, you know, right on the lee side of the divide and of the Rocky Mountains, that's kind of going to be the area where you see more of the downsloping effects when we have storm systems coming out of the northwest. And as we do in La Nina and going to the southeast, we tend to downslope a bit. So I think that's why we're seeing a little more of the effects here. And then we had those storms that helped bring this out. And just to kind of point out, I was alerted that this is the 90th and 97th percentile lines over the year of January through December, not the ones we're used to seeing of the April through October. So, so just wanted to kind of briefly go over there, give a snapshot there. So now we're going to kind of go into what we are expecting for this year. So currently we are still in La Nina, the La Nina pattern. So again, that kind of brings the storm systems up and over the Pacific Northwest, and then brings it down in this northwest flow across the Intermountain West and into the Great Plains. And again, that tends to bring a little more drier, but barely. Again, it's a very weak signal. So a little drier, a little warmer signature in the winter times across most of the state. And then a little bit wetter, cooler over the northwest part of the state. But this El Nino is forecast to start weakening into the spring months. And then neutral phase, the chances of the neutral phase taking over is getting increasingly more in through the late spring into the summer. But then as you see further down into the late summer into the early fall, it does look like signs are pointing to La Nina possibly returning, but pretty equal chances in terms of neutral conditions here in the July, August, September timeframe, with La Nina kind of winning out a little bit more going into next winter, which isn't uncommon, right? Because La Nina can typically last 1 to 3 years. So not too surprising there. So these are the CPC, the Climate Prediction Center outlooks. Now I didn't show the ones that are containing the 2 potential strong systems that are coming up within the week to 2 weeks. But we could see some pretty significant precipitation out of this weekend, starting Thursday timeframe into Sunday. It does look like a pretty good system. It digs down far enough. And it does look like it'll be cold enough to see a lot of that as snow. The actual liquid amounts are looking about like 1 to 3 or 4 inches as a whole across the state, with more favoring eastern Colorado and into the Front Range Mountains, and then down into the southern mountains. And we could see more precipitation amounts even in the mountains like that. But still it's looking like a good chance. And then we'll have a couple day break. And then it looks like another pretty good, what we call 4-corner low occurring early to mid next week. So that could bring another substantial shot of precipitation and some cooler weather, which, you know, it's March. So we're not too surprised to see those kind of of storms, and we're quite thankful for them for that opportunity, just with what we've been dealing with. So we're looking forward to that, but then looking further ahead into that, and I'm just showing these 3 month at a time outlook. So this top left one is the March, April, May precipitation outlook, and then temperature outlook. So it does look like our springtime is looking towards below normal favored of precipitation, as well as warmer temperatures, right? So there's above normal chance of seeing those warmer temperatures. And then looking further ahead into the early summer, not looking as favored for drier conditions, but still there is that greater than 40% chance eking into the northern part of the state. But still, 33% down here or less, seeing those drier conditions, as well as above normal temperatures being favored for that May, June, July timeframe. And then looking further into the fall time, late summer, early fall, July, August, September, we still have, just in the northern part of the state, looking like there could be better chances to see the drier than normal conditions, but across the rest of the state, you're going to see equal chances of seeing weather, either drier or wetter weather for the July, August, September timeframe. But still, this whole summer, we are looking for a better chance of seeing those above normal temperatures than any sort of cooler. The signature for any sort of cooler temperatures are staying far, far away from us. So definitely looking at a warmer and drier pattern through the summer. So looking at the potential for the La Nina to stick around, or a weak La Nina into a neutral, maybe going back into a La Nina, the seasonal drought outlook is keeping that drought persisting across the state. So even if we get this, these couple good storms this March over the next 2 weeks, looking at the next 3 months, just with those signatures of a warm and dry pattern, it won't do too much to the drought monitor in terms of that 3-month outlook period. So still looking for the drought to persist. We're not going to have this rapid improvement or anything like that. And so taking all these ingredients into this, this is the predictive services outlook for the significant wildland fire potential outlook. So we see that little bit of greater or above normal eking into the southeastern part of the state for March for this month, and then kind of staying there, but keeping above normal into April, but you start seeing that chances increase out of the desert Southwest. And then looking into May and June, start seeing that spread a little bit further into the central and southwestern part of Colorado, and spreading really across the Four Corners area to see that potential be above normal for significant wildland fires. So to wrap all that up, so our drought, the whole state is covered in some sort of drought status. Over half of it is in the extreme drought, the D3 or D4, so extreme drought or worse. So over half of it is like that, and it is forecast to persist the next 3 months at least. But with that warm and potentially drier weather potentially expected throughout the whole summer and into early fall, that could persist right up into the fall conditions. And then thinking back to last year, where gosh, our fall was just so warm and so dry, and just extended everything just later and later into October. Our fuel conditions, we're about near to below average levels right now for the time period, except for the Front Range foothills, where we're seeing a little more drying effects of this La Nina pattern, at least of the data I could find. The temperature and precipitation outlooks, again, odds will be favoring that warmer and drier pattern with this La Nina, weak La Nina to neutral stance. So we're going to most likely see this warmer and drier pattern overall. Again, you can't always get these, microclimate storms that can come through. And that's why climate forecasting is quite difficult, especially if you're looking at a small area, because that could be thrown off by just, a few storms. But overall, as a greater look across the state, we're going to be seeing better chances of seeing that warmer and drier conditions throughout the summer. And so therefore, significant wildland fire potential outlook is looking for that above normal significant fire potential to kind of eke up from southeast Colorado, characterized by the wind-driven fires and that pre-green up fuel conditions. And then as the summer wears on, we'll see that kind of spread into the central part of the state, into the southwestern part of the state by the second half of June. And what I wanted to do is summarizing like kind of each ingredient in this, because there is so much, right, to consider of what a fire season is going to be like. And, one thing like the monsoon not showing up, especially the last 2 years, just being really weak and just hardly showing up at all. I mean, that affected all of Colorado, Utah, Arizona, everyone, had a pretty terrible wildfire season, just not having that extra boost of precipitation in the early summer time. So this is just kind of looking at each ingredient, what we're expecting, but still whether saying, we're going to have a huge fire year or not. It's really hard to pin on all these either at it singly or all of them mixed together, but just wanting to give you a good overall look at what we're kind of keeping tabs on and what we're forecasting. I want to make sure that everybody knows our fire weather forecast services webpage. My contact information is on this. This is just a snapshot, but if you scroll down through the page, there's a lot of resources for you there. There's a lot of places to get the information that you might need. If you are not seeing something that you would like to see, please email me. Also, our phone number is on the very bottom of the page. We are there. We're the National Weather Service. We are there 24 hours a day. We are ready to talk with you. That's what we're here for. We are here to provide our partners, our fire partners, the service that they need in order to, safely conduct their business. We are available to talk at any time, even if you got a spot forecast and you have questions on it. Please do not hesitate to contact us. Give us more resources of, kind of what you're thinking, and then we can kind of take that into our operations and just to provide you the best product that we can. Coordination, collaboration, it's all very important so that everybody gets what they need, right? So please don't hesitate to call us. We're always there. And with that, that is all. Again, thank you to the coalition for inviting me to give this presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lisa. That was fantastic. That answered a lot of questions that I've been kind of noodling on, and I think that's been helpful for a lot of people. We do have one question here from Boyd Lebed. He says, Lisa, were the downsloping wind events on the east side of the Continental Divide during the summer and fall 2020 unusual, or is that part of the climatology?
I wouldn't say that they're too unusual. A lot of the times it was just that fall time, when the jet stream starts making its annual shift south. It's just bringing those stronger storm systems down, and you get that really warm and windy pattern ahead of it. Now that one though in September, that one was quite unusual when that low dug into the Great Basin. The orders of magnitude that I think the standard deviation was like 3.8 or something. I mean, it was, I don't know if that deep of a storm system had ever arrived in the Great Basin that soon. So in that regards, that one was quite unusual. But you know, you're always going to get as the jet stream starts sinking south, you're going to start seeing those systems come down to bring us those snows, to bring us that warm and windy events ahead of that. And I think just with the overlying drought conditions and those fires, those big fires being in that beetle kill area, and then it just burning in and it creating just so much heat, that all just, you know, combined to make that perfect storm. But yeah, just having those later lasting fires, they'll experience the windier, more strong weather patterns that fall will bring.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat box here. So I want to thank you, Lisa, again for coming to speak today. This was fantastic. And you saw her email there, and we'll pop her email in. If you'd pop that into the chat box as well. That way you can contact her if you have any additional questions. We're going to transition here to Gabe Donaldson, who's going to be talking about the Elkhorn 4 prescribed fire escape of, gosh, that was 2019 now. There's a long 2020 in between now and then. And I'm going to hand it over to Gabe. And thank you again, Lisa. And let you go on ahead here, Gabe.
All right, super. Hey, Ty, am I good just to share my screen? Okay.
Yeah, I also have your PowerPoint pulled up as well in case you
Well,
have
maybe,
any
yeah,
issues.
maybe if you, well, I'll pull it up because I want to use my cursor a little bit. So if I can figure Zoom out, just a second. Okay. Well, I trust everyone can see that. Great.
Looks
And
good.
I think I'm gonna take myself off of the camera here, or attempt to, if I can find the icon. We'll disregard. Anyhow, yeah, I'm Gabe Donaldson. I'm here this morning to talk about the Elkhorn 4 prescribed fire that we conducted in October of 2019. And I'll talk a little bit about the subsequent escapes that we had as well. A little bit of lessons learned, you know, what happened, and some takeaways that I have. Before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about myself and give you all a quick introduction. I'm a dad. That's my son Tegan up there. He is 5, and I was jumping when we had Tegan, and that was sort of the onus for coming over to Colorado again and joining the Nature Conservancy. So I've been in NGO work for the last 5 or 6 years, and before that I did work out of Boise, and then I ran a hotshot crew out of Nevada as well, and you can see a picture of the crew there. Some of those guys didn't get the message that we were smiling in this picture, but that's all right. And then of course, you know, on the right there, my puppies, they're in the office with me all the time. And so I guess for lack of hobbies, I foster and rescue pit bulls. So just a little background about myself there. I currently work for the Ember Alliance, and was the previous Colorado, Arizona Fire Program Manager for the Nature Conservancy. So quick outline, I'm going to spend some time here at the beginning doing some thank yous and acknowledgements. I'll pull up a map of the prescribed fire, kind of talk about, you know, what we were doing at a 30,000 foot level. Then I want to just touch briefly on the 5 levers that were pulled that day, and some discussion around that. And then, you know, a little bit about what I've learned and how I've grown. I think that's important. And then some lessons learned that I took away from it. And then hopefully if there's time at the end, we can field some questions and I'll do my best to answer those. So I really want to begin. This is the first time that I've been sort of able to openly talk about this fire. I was not in a position to speak about it for some time. So I really want to kick this off by thanking a number of people that I didn't have a chance to reach out to following the incident officially. So, Larimer County Sheriff's Office was integral in us having a smooth, speedy, effective transition. And, in particular, Derek Rosenquist was fabulous to work with, along with Justin, Kevin, Dave, the list goes on. There were a ton of cooperators who came out to help. I think all told, we had about 50 folks in our organization, and I don't want to thank every one of them individually, but I do appreciate them coming out. I want to call out and thank the review team for their effort and work put into the review and producing that product. It was a very cordial and good process. And on that note, I'd also like to thank CDPHE and DFPC for their involvement with that and the community meetings and the follow-up after the incident. The Northern Colorado Fireshed Collaborative was just really special to be a part of that group and to have their support following the escape. And it's a long list of folks, and I would like to call everybody out, but I can't. I want to thank the Nature Conservancy for their support following the escape. It was, there was a lot of work and a lot of things that we had to do, and it was great having their support. And in particular, I'd like to thank Rob Addington and Parker Titus for stepping up at the community meetings and helping with the discovery and synthesis part of the review. And then also want to thank Dave Lasky for stepping up at the community meeting as well. And then thanks to all of you for having me on today. I appreciate the chance to talk and share some information. So digging in a little bit to the fire itself, and I'll pull up a map on the next slide so we can get oriented a little bit better. But essentially we had 505 acres of open stand ponderosa that was had a really big grass component to it, and about 15% of it was brush. Part of the objectives for the fire were to achieve some stand mortality, not stand mortality, but some tree mortality, and to rearrange certain components of the stand composition. It was a first entry prescribed fire, and so we were, we were willing to accept some certain fire effects. We ran our models in Behave with GR2 and TU1, had 2 subunits, 4A and 4B, and we burned 4A on the first day and had a successful day. And then we had drop points around the fire with miscellaneous tactical functions. And we used a larger organization intentionally. Part of the intent there was to increase training opportunities for our partners and internally. And I also wanted to have additional resources on scene for peace of mind. So looking at a map here, I'm hoping you all can see my cursor. But this is, 4A, obviously we burned on the first day. We started up here at DP10, split out, and had a successful day where we tied it in. Things got a little hot at points over here in this grass, and we managed to protect these values at risk that are circled in yellow, and we were able to complete this line as well from DP 110 over to 30. So we essentially had, a third or a quarter of the line complete for Elkhorn 4B the next shift. The next day we met at drop point 30 and had our morning briefing. Our test fire was at 11:05, and really it was pretty skunky and wasn't doing a whole lot. It was still cloudy and sheltered. I had a really good conversation that morning after our briefing. I think it may have been during the briefing with the Sheriff's Department about our wildfire declaration protocol, and we were actually able to run through that and make sure that that component of the plan was crisp. We knew that we were getting some winds out of the west and southwest, and this corridor down here also has some pretty significant diurnal winds. This is the Elkhorn Creek drainage here. We had previously burned all of this out here to the left of the unit, or to the west, so that's been treated. And our leader's intent really for the morning was to establish a black line from DP30 to DP40. We accomplished that sometime around 1:30 or so. And this you can see this sort of triangular drainage here. That was all black. And, you know, we had some heat in these trees and things like that. At that point, we had folks starting to do some interior lighting here in quadrant G8 and F7, you know, kind of working along some of these micro ridges, really with the intent to draw fire down towards our hose lay at the bottom, or we were going to wrap it with fire at the end of the shift. But anyway, our big priority was to buff this eastern edge out. We got our first spot at 1545, right about, you know, basically in the drop point 30 area. The review put the source of the spots from a punky log somewhere over in here in the F8 area. So we got our first spot. The burn boss trainee and I, excuse me, were able to wrap that up. It was just a punky log. Not a real big deal, but that's when we decided to, you know, cease ignitions, and you know, then it was sort of a rapid series of events, and a succession of events occurred leading up to the escape. So we ceased ignitions. I started to do some patrolling out here. The burn boss trainee did some additional patrolling and wanted to investigate our smoke impacts out here in the Glacier View upper you know, neighborhood. So 1515, I think we had our first spot. 1545, we had two more spots down here around these green dots, which represent piles. No, the piles didn't ignite. It just moved into some grass here. And it took off and aligned with some ridgetop winds that were really significant at that point. We were getting gusts to 24. So we were really trying to catch up with the problem that was kind of being posed to us. But by the time these two spots were established in this little draw here, it was moving really quickly. So we established a flank here on the right, and people from you know, kind of a short squad was put together to start addressing the fire in the grass. I hiked the left flank of the fire and made it to about here when I got to the head of the fire. It may have been a little further, but I knew that you know, we were looking at a pretty significant slop over at this point that had been generated by these spots. And fortunately, sometime between here, hiking from here to here, I notified Derek Rosenquist that I'd likely be declaring this an escape. When I got to the head, declared it an escape, had it turned over to Derek in a matter of minutes, may have been 3 minutes or so. So I think all told, maybe 10 or 15 minutes elapsed between the spots getting out and making the determination that it was an escape. And then we just went into wildfire mode at that point. And I think I'm not really going to speak to great length about the elk fire per se, but I will say that it was a robust, aggressive response to a wildfire event, and we were treating it as such. And I felt like the response for that time of year was fabulous. And so anyhow, the escape ends up sneaking out and impacting Deep Cut Road and a few different residents here. The Glacier View subdivision just gets bigger and bigger the further east you go. on this map. And so this was you know, it was a real gut-wrenching thing to see. But we were able to catch it. We utilized aircraft. Again, we fought the fire. You know, we made the decision to fight it quickly. And I feel like the suppression went well. I don't want to downplay the fact that it had a really significant impact to our partners and to the community. But all things being equal, I feel like, you know, having the additional folks on scene and being able to clarify that process quickly really led to some better outcomes. So you know, there were five levers were pulled that day. It was dry, it was a little warm, it was windy, and we were burning. You know, we were burning in adjacent to the WUI. There was large acreage. We were burning for good ecological benefit. We were burning at the high end of the prescription, and I recognized that. And we were working with an ad hoc organization. So as far as burning in the WUI is concerned, I really don't subscribe to the fact that we have achieved social license yet. And I think one of the many things that sort of that I learned was that we can't notify people enough of our intent to burn. And I don't know, I think that there was obviously a lot of frustration about the escape and the subsequent evacuations, but I also think there was some similar frustration because some folks didn't know that we were conducting the burn. We did a really aggressive outreach campaign, direct mail, next door, tried to push it through on social networks and things like that, but really it's boots on the ground that gets the notifications done. I think burning in the WUI, I think we need to co-think around our complexity analysis. You know, that's such a foundational piece to our burn planning process. And I think that, you know, hindsight being 2020, I would have gone out to the unit with some cooperators, walked around it and really talked about what the worst possible outcomes could have been, essentially a pre-mortem exercise. And I think that would have had some value. I don't know if it would have changed the decisions that day. I really try to avoid spending too much time thinking that way, but I think that would have had some value. And then I think, you know, a real important take home was to ensure that our declaration plans are crisp. And when we can, I think having that jurisdictional IC on scene, or at least arriving for morning briefing, really has a lot of value and helped make that transition clearer and crisper. You know, as far as burning at the high end of the prescription, again, I think, you know, doing a pre-mortem exercise and having more time to commit to just thinking through what we were doing would have had some benefit. I think that, you know, we need to utilize behave until smoke is coming out of our ears. Behave is not something that, you know, I think it's something that we have to utilize it, and we have to utilize the fire modeling software that's available to us to really paint the best picture that we can. You know, burning for good ecological benefit, there were a number of things that we could have potentially done differently as far as seasonality of burning, type of burning, slope burning, although we didn't necessarily have the same kind of amount of acreage to deal with for slope burning, but we could have done some different approaches, mosaic burning, patch burning, etc., to, you know, throughout the winter. And then, yeah, we had some volunteers, and we had an ad hoc organization, and I don't think that was necessarily bad, but I think that what we have to be cognizant of is to ensure that we have the appropriate levels of leadership and experience that are complementary to each other. And you know, again, hindsight being 2020, had we all spent an additional day or two gathering essay, kind of exercising our positions and working working out some of those kinks, you know, it may have led to a different outcome. I don't know. But those were the 5 levers that were pulled, and I think that it's fair to say that, you know, probably shouldn't pull all of them at once. But I do think, you know, we can find ourselves in a position where we're burning at the high end of the prescription, but maybe not adjacent to a WUI. We're accomplishing, you know, good ecological benefit without going after large acres. So I think there's a way to play with these 5 levers in a way that makes more sense than pulling all 5 at once. So how have I changed and what have I learned? I mean, this is, you know, it's really tough to capture what this whole process has been like. But I guess the first thing I'd like to really iterate is that I have a deep responsibility for what happened and to the communities that were impacted, as well as the fire community. And that's been something that I've had to wrestle with personally during the last, you know, year and a half. You know, prescribed fire is still my dojo right now. It's where, you know, where I work and what I focus on. And I think that coming out of this, I'm more of a student of fire than I ever have been, and find myself really spending the extra time to read, search, ask, and understand all components of what it is that I'm planning. It goes without saying that my awareness of liability and consequences is kind of through the roof right now. But I also, I want to be cautious in saying this, but I also recognize that we did create something of benefit, even though it was an extremely expensive outcome, and it impacted people's personal lives, and it burned down a shed. I think that, you know, at the end of the day, we did create something that was going to serve a strong tactical function later. And that was really the intent of that burn, was to connect all of our previous units and to continue working in cooperation with our partners, including those with the Forest Service, and starting to piece this whole landscape together. You know, hindsight exercises can be dangerous. I just put that in there because I feel like, you know, if and when this happens again, I really truly believe that that we need to support each other and be careful about, you know, I guess be able to talk with others about this, and I would put myself out there as a volunteer to be a touchstone if this happens again, because it's not a particularly fun process going through an escape and a subsequent review. The review process, on that note, was humbling, and a lot of things, some stones were uncovered, and all in all, I think that, you know, it raised some good points and some strong reminders. My only sort of big piece of opposition is that this collaborative burn model that I often operate under in the NGO sector, it has to work, and collaboration has to work. And as far as I see it, success is partly dictated by how many folks show up and work together to accomplish this similar objective. And so I'm going to continue to advocate for and promote that we seek collaboration and opportunities to work together in accomplishing these big objectives. Few other lessons learned from my perspective. You know, I really think, and this is sort of a force of habit for me, but I think it's just something I want to reiterate, is that we need to involve our cooperators and local fire response authorities, yeah, during the whole process. The scoping process for this prescribed fire was about 1.5 years. And we did involve folks in the planning process, but I think, you know, if the fire protection districts can keep showing up and supporting this work, it means a lot to me, and it goes a long way. And I think it has a strong tactical advantage as well. We need to make sure our contingency plans are understood, and make sure we're using the right composition of resources for the situation. And I'm not saying that we didn't, but again, if I think through things, there were small tactical decisions that could have been made with where resources were placed, and it could have had a different outcome. We need to be prepared for another escape. And I note here that we need to erase the escape stigma. I don't like get involved with too much social media or anything. I don't know exactly what folks were saying following the escape. But, you know, we need to continue to be in the corner of our burn bosses and practitioners should something happen. And again, incredible solidarity and support from the fire shed and the forest and everybody following this incident. The last thing, I don't know, I think that everyone can sort of reserve or make their own judgment with respect to what they think about the escape and how they think through it. So you could say that some good decisions were made and some bad decisions were made, however it is that you'd like to think about it. I think that there were some really tremendously good decisions that were made that day, despite the outcome. And one of those decisions was working so closely with the Sheriff's Department in creating a quick, crisp, effective transition. So that's what I have prepared. And I'll close my presentation here. See if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Gabe. That was excellent. We have a few questions here and just and a couple of comments. In general, just a lot of thank yous and appreciation for you taking the time to talk about this today. It's I know it's a tough subject, and we have one question here from Gloria Edwards. Really respect what Gabe is saying here. How can Southern Rockies Fire Science Exchange Network, the JFSP project she works for and runs, support BEHAVE needs for operations, trainings, and webinars?
That's a really good question, and thank you, Gloria. I think that additional training or webinars on BEHAVE and some of the limits of BEHAVE would be really valuable. And I know that personally speaking, I operate off of a pretty strict kind of same BEHAVE model for most things, but I think that there'd be a lot of value in playing around with it and really testing the limits and maybe looking at some sort of you know, staged learning event for BEHAVE. And I think that, you know, maybe, you know, another thing of value that maybe, you know, for me personally would be to just have someone I could run the BEHAVE models off of. And I know I could probably reach out to the Forest and Jimmy and bounce some ideas off of him. I'm sure, hate to put you on the spot, Jimmy, but I could probably bounce some ideas off of him. But I think that if Surfson was involved and willing to help expand our understanding of BEHAVE, I would benefit from that, and I'm sure others would too.
Awesome, thank you, Gabe. And I want to tag on to that that Boyd Lebed notes that the revision of S390 will have a good BEHAVE Plus component coming later this spring. And I know he's been, when he's been teaching 390, he's been integrating more and more of that in advance of this transition. So that's great to hear. We have another question here from Tom Moore. What were wind speeds at the time of Elkhorn ignition and the forecast for the persistence of wind? Smoke was transported to population centers well away from the burn site.
Yeah, so our winds were, you know, they were pretty typical. We had diurnal winds that were influenced by that Elkhorn drainage. And admittedly, that was one of the things that I was more fixated on. Because I understood we were going to be getting some potential down canyon pushes. So I think we were all prepared for west-southwest winds. The ignitions ceased when we got a 24-mile-per-hour wind gust, and I think that the gusts ended up exceeding 30 miles per hour that day. So you know, we really did test that edge of the prescription. And again, you know, I think by the time the decision was made to cease ignitions, we were already starting to rotate towards thinking about this as an escape event. Yeah, so I don't know if that clearly, or if I'm articulating my answer correctly, but I don't have the weather forecast in front of me, but it was dry. The RHs were low and the wind was high. The other thing I would note is where we started our test fire at DP 30, working towards DP 40. In my experience on the ground, it was really sheltered. And the other thing that maybe contributed to some heuristics here was that you couldn't see glacier view. It was hidden behind a series of ridges and hills. So I don't know. I mean, again, I think hindsight exercises are, you know, kind of the bane of my existence sometimes, but there were a number of different things there that kind of happened in quick succession. So I don't know if I'm answering your question there, but yeah, we were experiencing some high winds on the ridge tops.
Excellent. Thank you, Gabe. And there's, just want to direct people into the chat box here. There is some good conversation about, you know, using IFTDIS or WFDIS, two different fire behavior tools for prescribed fire planning. Rocco Snart, who is the WFDIS administrator for the state of Colorado, notes that we should be using the geospatial playground within the interagency fuels treatment decision support system, which is a mouthful, to allow for this kind of spatial fire modeling. And they have just integrated another fire spread modeling within it, minimum travel time. And I know they're planning to increase the excuse me, the tools available for prescribed fire. So maybe we can use that as a future presentation for the council. Not seeing any other questions in the chat box for you, just a lot of thank yous. I want to thank you again, Gabe, for presenting today and for giving this information. I want to also say we're here at, I've got 10:41 on my clock. Let's do a 5-minute bio break for everybody. I know this has been a long time in front of a Zoom. Refill coffee or tea, do the opposite if need be. And we will be back here at 10:47 for our final lightning round with a bunch of different presenters talking about their prescribed fire programs in the state and what they've learned from the past year and what they're looking forward to. So 10:42 now, see everybody back ready to go at 10:47. Thank you. Hopefully that was a good, well-deserved, well-needed bio break. So we're going to move here into a lightning round of different presentations from different agencies that are doing prescribed fire in the state. This is not an entirely inclusive list of all the people that are doing this work. You know, we always have limited time with these things, and so we just grabbed a grab bag of folks, and we look forward in next sessions here of the Prescribed Fire Council to bring in new presenters from different groups and presenting on what they've been doing. So we'll be focusing a bit today on what people have learned during this past year of major wildfires and the pandemic, and the work they've been able to do and what they're looking forward to in the next year. So this will be a lightning session, so about 5 minutes per person. We'll be moving quickly, and I'm going to hand this over to Brian Keating with the Forest Service to kick us off here.
Hey, thanks, Daniel. So I appreciate the time this morning, appreciate the presenters, the information that's been shared and the discussion that's occurred. So some of what I'll touch on will obviously tier into what you've already heard for some other folks, but for the U.S. Forest Service, kind of COVID was a big factor for us this past year. So back in April of 2020, our regional forester put an operational pause on all prescribed fire implementation in the region due to the acceleration of COVID-19 and concerns over smoke impacts to public health associated with COVID and obviously prescribed fire. But then in late June 2020, we reevaluated and developed a process in which the forest could again implement prescribed fire, although final decision approval to light a match was still retained with the regional forester. So as part of this process, our forest would complete a project-specific risk assessment and include in their assessment particular attention to current COVID-19 levels, areas with sensitive populations, and consideration of smoke, both day and nighttime impacts to adjacent communities. Also considering this process and as part of the risk assessment was consideration of employee exposure to smoke given COVID health concerns, travel needed for resources to support our project because we were trying to limit travel obviously, and then also the social political considerations associated with the project in the area in which it would be implemented. During this time, the region, we only received 2 requests for asking for approval to light under this process. Both of those projects were in Wyoming. However, due to concerns raised by the Wyoming Division of Forestry, neither one of them were approved. So we still weren't putting fire on the ground through the early part of summer last year. Then in September, due to moderation of COVID levels and additional information gained on smoke impacts and implementation of prescribed fire, our regional forester adopted a business as usual stance with regard to prescribed fire implementation and delegated decision authority to light a match back to the local forest supervisors. As many of you know, September through November here in Colorado tend to be a primary fall burn window for many of our forests, especially the southern forests like the San Juan. But one thing that complicated, and you heard from Lisa, was emerging and continuing drought conditions precluded any planned activity. So even though we were back in business as usual, we really weren't in a position to put any prescribed fire on the ground. And then, as you heard from James and from other fires across the state, mid-October of last year, in response to those historic wildfire conditions, the continuing strengthening of drought conditions across most of the state and our region, and a lack of resource availability and need to focus on wildfire response, the regional forester again put a pause on all prescribed fire implementation and once again retained the approval authority for any future actions. It's significant to note that even though we were on this operational pause, it was unlikely that the San Juan or any other forests that do a lot of fall burning would have been operational given the historic drought conditions they were experiencing. Bottom line was that we were out of prescription and would not have met our objectives and exceeded our risk thresholds. Because of that, likely we probably missed 10 to 25,000 acres of prescribed fire implementation in the state of Colorado, but it was a combination of both the COVID, our wildfire conditions, drought conditions, all of those things combined into that. And then and so then we moved back into, if you look at November through the current day right now, our winter weather was slow to arrive in much of the region, including Colorado, which delayed the start of pile burning across a lot of the state. As of March 1st, our Colorado forests have burned over 3,200 acres of piles, and some of this recent winter weather we just got has facilitated some additional pile burning, so we expect those numbers to go up. Some of our forests and grasslands here in Colorado are planning and implementing lower elevation fuel types, like 10 to 15,000 acres on the Colorado-Kansas grasslands we're looking at, and also some higher elevation south slope burning is coming up in the next few weeks. We're also continuing to support Region 8. We send a lot of our resources to Region 8 to help them. This is their primary burn window, and we're moving a lot of resources within the region to support our forests. So we're back into our resource stretch here to support activities across the region again. two other things real quick to note. The region reached out to and worked with APCD to keep them informed of the regional stance on prescribed fire activity and decision authorities over the past year. And we appreciated the dialogue, support, and identification of solutions to overcome both real and perceived public health concerns. APCD, specifically working with Boyd, developed and implemented a process to identify additional COVID-related considerations in the burn permit approval process and tied it directly to the state's kind of color wheel approach to determining COVID activity levels. That was incorporated into our forest and project-specific risk assessments, and as to date has not resulted in any lost burn windows. That was not a limiting factor. So for us, it was all about risk sharing and public education information, and it was a good positive experience. So we appreciate that. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And as we get the windows, we're going to get after it. But the continuing drought and other factors are obviously complicating the picture for us. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for taking the time today. Up next, we've got Kirk Will with the Division of Fire Prevention and Control.
Sure. Thanks, guys. I'm going to share my screen right here with you guys real quick. Sorry, I use Google Meet more than I use Zoom, so I hope I'm going to get this right. Everybody can see the presentation, I hope.
Yep, looking good. Thanks, sir. Okay.
Once again, my name is Kirk Will. I'm with the Colorado Division of Fire Prevention Control, state of Colorado. I'm gonna discuss what we got going on, who we are, what our role is in prescribed fire, and some upcoming burn projects that hopefully we can get implemented this year, as well as some certified burner information for folks that are interested in that. So who we are, our mission, we're here to serve and safeguard the people and protect the property, resources, environment, and quality of life in Colorado. So we're housed underneath the Colorado Department of Public Safety. And then under that in DFPC, we have 4 sections: wildland fire management, fire and life safety, professional qualifications and training, and our Center of Excellence. So our role in prescribed fire, we're housed underneath, of course, the wildland fire management section of DFPC. We assist state, local, and federal agencies and private individuals in project design and planning, technical review and advice, actual burn implementation, and administration of the Colorado Certified Burner Program that has been pretty well received within the private entities here in the state. As what Brian was saying, our broadcast burn projects this last year were pretty limited due to COVID. We were following in suit with our federal partners, where we did not implement any broadcast burning this last year due to COVID and physical distancing. Also, we started getting into that drought pattern. So a lot of our projects were out of prescription at that point anyway. With that, we have some upcoming stuff that's in the hopper that we're hoping to start getting implemented. You can read through some of these. Several areas across the state. We're also assisting some other agencies, Colorado Springs Utilities, town of Frederick, Colorado here, with some burning hopefully this spring. But once again, it's going to be limited this year to the fuel conditions, the drought conditions, and of course, COVID's still going to be somewhat of a factor. We're going to limit our scope and size of projects to reflect some of that physical distancing if we have to. But we're hoping for some burning later this spring and the fall, but we'll have to see what the weather brings. And I'm hoping maybe some of the snow that's upcoming will help that. Pile burning, last year we had a great pile burn year, as a lot of people did. The winter of 19 was pretty good. We were well out of drought, of course, as Lisa was saying. We burned a couple thousand piles last year statewide. We had a really good year, and then March hit, and we stopped burning even piles. This year we haven't burned a lot of piles either, just due to what Brian was saying, the slow coming of the winter weather. We're starting to get back into the pile burning now that we're starting to get that snow. Currently, we've got around 18 different pile burn projects statewide, a couple thousand piles. And of course, we're assisting some other agencies, some locals and counties with some project planning and implementation later this year. And I'm hoping this snow is going to materialize here in the next few days so we can maybe get some more done here this next week. Certified burner program, what we have coming up with that. We're going to start offering the certified burner class again later this spring and again this next fall. We're going to have both those classes be completely virtual, still due to COVID-19 concerns and those physical distancing requirements. Maybe the next fall class we'll be able to do more of an in-person type of thing, but we'll have to see. We're going to work with the Ember Alliance for some of that course delivery. They're a great partner for that. I think dates are still to be determined. We're going to post on that social media pages and our websites when we start getting that together for our new certified burner program classes. If you guys have any questions or if you need assistance, you can contact me using the email below. I'm always available to help you guys out and do whatever you need. So that's all I have.
Awesome. Thank you, Kirk. We've got Rich with US Fish and Wildlife coming up next to talk about their updates. Rich, Sterry, you still on here?
Yeah, yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yep, sure can. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, from a Fish and Wildlife Service perspective, Brian with Forest Service hit a lot of the points I was going to mention. So I'm the regional fire planner for Fish and Wildlife Service. Our region is 8 states. So it's North Dakota down through Kansas and then Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, and Montana. The effect of 1st April, our region, like the Forest Service, was extremely concerned with smoke management, traveling with the virus and the unknowns. So they implemented a moratorium on the 1st April on all prescribed fires. This was lifted in mid-May and kind of sort of given back to the units, but we had to have regional approval. And finally, they went back to more business as usual. But by the time that was lifted, most of our fuels are grass, and we were green out of our burn windows by the time that occurred. So last year, we did basically no wild or no prescribed fire in our region. There was a couple little burns done in eastern Kansas in the summer, but that was essentially it. So the moratorium took us from about 30 to 40,000 acres usually treated in the region down to a little less than 500. We were able to do some, and then as far as summer and our fall burning went, the kind of the wildfire season took care of that, with the Colorado wildfire season. Our guidance from the national and as well as the regional was we were going to help our partners with, wildfire suppression. There weren't any restrictions on us participating and going out of state or out of region other than following the COVID guidance, working as the module 1, masks, etc. We also have kind of a unique program. We have the Air Force program that's kind of administered out of Fish and Wildlife Service here in Lakewood. But we have folks at the Air Force Academy, Colorado Springs, Ellsworth in South Dakota. They weren't able to do any prescribed fire, even though they weren't under the moratorium. It was more following the states and the other federal agencies as well. But they were able to do some mechanical stuff. And we were able to get some mechanical work done down at Baca this year, kind of working as the module 1. Really what we kind of learned out of this was one was, working with our partners a lot more, kind of reinforced our commitment to work with our interagency partners. We are planning to do prescribed fire this next spring again, or this coming spring, as weather and allows, and with the drought conditions, we'll see what happens. Like I said, we do tend to burn a lot more. Our lands are lower elevation. So a lot more grass fuels involved. So we don't tend to have the long-term, 100,000 hour fuels where the Forest Service and them have. So we do have a little bit more leeway there, but like I said, we're going to be continuing to do our prescribed fires this spring, following the COVID guidance, helping our partners whenever we can. So any questions for me? Okay, that's kind of it. Thanks for allowing me to speak.
Yep. Thank you, Rich. No questions in the chat box, and I appreciate you coming here today to speak on what Fish and Wildlife's been up to. Up next, we've got Pete Wolf with Fort Carson and Piñon Canyon. And I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, can everybody hear me?
Loud and clear.
So, last few years at Fort Carson, Piñon Canyon, we've kind of been in a slumber in terms of burning. We've been going through some program changes, kind of seeing where Big Army was going with wildland fire and prescribed fire. So we haven't been really doing a lot. Last January, we did begin to look at a number of spring burns, primarily both on Fort Carson and on Piñon Canyon. And we were pushing towards looking somewhere between 10 and 12,000 acres for the spring. As the COVID thing kind of rolled its way out, we continued to plan, but Army kind of got in our way. They began to close down installations, restrict movement on the installations, and the more we began to look at kind of the risk assessment of particularly Piñon Canyon, what we tend to do there is we'll take 12 to 15 individuals, we'll move them down to the station that's at Piñon Canyon, we'll house them as a group there for anywhere from 7 to 10 days. That close contact was well outside of policy for in the Army, so we really couldn't push forward from there. So we basically canceled all of our spring birds. We got nothing accomplished. We began to look into the summer, and again, it was more of a matter of the Army was still restricting movement. Troop movements downrange were pretty limited. Fire stations were being held as individual, essentially cohorts, so that they were able to function day in and day out inside the confines of the fire station without masks and those types of things. But again, we were all being tracked through that, so we didn't get anything done prescribed fire-wise. We did have a couple wildland fires, 2 of which were on Piñon Canyon. Both of them were lightning caused. That did give us a pretty good clue of what it was going to look like in terms of suppression. Bend Canyon fire, we ended up bringing in 2 hotshot crews, and that was kind of an eye-opener to everybody. It was early season. A lot of the crews had really solidified how they were going to handle COVID. And we saw that some crews were pretty well equipped to just spike in the field and handle their own needs, while other crews were still kind of struggling with how that looked. But we got to that fairly easily in the space of about 5 days, and with no significant issues in terms of COVID. Looking forward for us right now, we're kind of caught up like everybody else into the drought cycle. We'd like to get some work done. Range use is starting to go up. So, obviously with that ignition potential, we've got some concerns, but at the same time, trying to be good stewards of the land, it's looking like we're going to be pretty limited in our function of putting, at least through the spring, putting fire on the ground. So that's really kind of where we're at. Anybody have any questions for me?
We've got a general question about slash pile burning treatment costs that I think if any of the presenters today that have subject matter expertise can respond to Chris in the chat box there, but looks like nothing specific for you regarding anything, Pete. Appreciate you coming and speaking with us today. That was great. Great to hear what y'all are up to.
Yep.
All right. Next, we've got Boyd Lebed with APCD, who will be speaking.
Hey, good morning. You got me on voice. Hear me? Yep, good deal. Hey, so thank you for letting me be part of this today. Appreciate it. I think this has been a well done meeting today, guys. It's been very informative for me. Really well done. Probably one of the silver linings of COVID is forcing us into this virtual world is got a broader audience and a broader reach of the efforts of the Prescribed Fire Council. So well done, good stroke. So yes, lightning, I'll move on. I would like to share my screen. I do have a few slides. Can you see that? It's coming. Got that?
Looks good.
Let's see. Can you see the slide?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, good deal. So, yeah, let me just move right on here. So Brian mentioned this. This is the dial tool we developed. So lots of unknowns when COVID got rolling, right? So it's a respiratory virus. Smoke is a respiratory irritant. We did not have a lot of hard data that said, yes, they're connected, but oh my gosh, you just could not ignore that they would not be. So we took a evaluation of that, and we took an approach to say that we're not going to do additional regulatory requirements on permits. We're going to leave the permits as they are and then just give some recommended guidance on different situations. So this is the dial tool Brian mentioned. We basically, in a concise way to say it, the higher smoke production projects, so machine piles, WUI burns, it would have some additional considerations to do when the dial was up at red and purple on how much COVID activity is in a county. So just simply because the red and purple is when a county would be experiencing near capacity of their hospital medical capability. We would not want to be aggravating health concerns or even perception of health concerns in that situation. So that's the nutshell of what the dial guide is. Pleased that Brian reported it didn't cost them any burn windows, and I'm hoping it didn't for others as well. Although, just perceptions and choices, you don't know what all is going to happen. So that's a relief to do that. Here's the trend is going down for COVID occurrence throughout Colorado. Blue is good, obviously. Green would be best, but it's trending down pretty much everywhere. Grant County it's currently the only one at orange, and it's trending down, but still worthy of checking. COVID could do a resurgence as far as we know. I'm sure you've all looked at that. Just reflecting what most of the other presenters have reported, here's our permit activity and showing the 2020 activity that I got off of our database. So the purple line, of course, is the broadcast, and that's what everyone was describing. Broadcast takes a bigger organization. It's just harder to protect your own staff and account for the public smoke impact. So there's just a great reduction in that. Pile burning also had a reduction, probably because of the loss of the spring, the end of the winter pile burning season and the spring pile burning. But yet those are done with a smaller organization, generally have a smaller smoke impact as they're implemented. So while there was a decrease from 2019 in pile burn activity, the red and green lines still kind of one of the higher years we've had in the last dozen or so. So pile burning did continue to roll on. As far as smoke impacts, this is a slide I just took from Scott Landis' presentation back at our December stakeholder meeting. Yeah, massive smoke impact on communities from wildfires in 2020. Just nearby and far away fires all contributed really significant smoke and air quality impacts in Colorado. So record numbers of action days, as well as air quality health advisories issued in Colorado. So the multiple ways to look at this, of course, we could say we don't want to put any more smoke up prescribed fire. People have already had enough, but yet I think it's a good conversation to have to say, like Jimmy illustrated, that places we had done treatment, broadcast burning especially, and other places that had done mechanical treatment of pile burning, they were a factor in how the larger aggressive wildfire burned. So there's potentially a leverage point on that, and certainly a point of conversation that you could have with folks. So anyways, we're not lots more to talk about with that. So just a couple of quick little things I'd like to say. We're in the process of tying up the 2020 database, so please send in your annual summary Form Fs. We've got the sensors. I'd also like to say that our online permit system is going into design starting this month. So we're going to be building that and hope to have that sometime later this year. Don't know exactly when. So I will close that out and take any questions if anybody's got any. Glad to respond to stuff in the chat as well, though.
Boyd, that was great. I really appreciate you presenting on that. Very useful. I don't see any specific questions for you in the chat box. Again, if you have anybody else has any questions for any of our speakers today, go ahead and plunk them in there. And as one quick reminder, as we're moving in, please remember to fill out your post-event survey. Ty punched that in up at the top of or in the chat box earlier, and fill that in so we can get some feedback and learn how we can improve in the future. Thank you, Boyd. We're going to bump next to Dave Lasky with the Ember Alliance to update on that organization.
Thanks, Daniel. And I will ask Tyler to go ahead and queue up the presentation. Good morning, everybody. I'm Dave Lasky. I'm the Director of Fire Management for the Ember Alliance. I suspect the Ember Alliance is the least well-known of all the organizations doing this quick round robin. So I wanted to just take a moment and talk a little bit about our history. In 2017, we started with the Forest Stewards Guild to stand up a wildland fire module. Over the course of the last couple of years, I think for reasons that we all are aware of, fire management and prescribed fire has become an increasingly large area of interest and need. In 2020, we merged with the Colorado TNC Southern Rockies module and brought their resources together with ours. And now in 2021, we've actually spun off from the Forest Stewards Guild as a standalone fire-focused nonprofit. That allows us to really focus on our two primary efforts, programs and partnerships, doing a lot of CWPP work, as well as our fire operations and NWCG training. Next slide. And so operationally, we're really focused, and this I think resonates with what Gabe presented, as well as what Jimmy talked about. We're really focused on being able to stand up a Type 3 prescribed fire organization and burn at scale. And so what that has meant is we have the ability to put together a 10-person module, 4 Type 6 engines, and then a large movable trailer essentially that lets us set up a Type 3 incident management organization, as well as provision folks in a backcountry setting for up to 14 days. Next slide. And so I think, like all the other presenters, in terms of what COVID-19 meant for us in 2020, initially it shut us down completely. We suspended all plans for broadcast burning. We attempted actually to look carefully at some of our projects, and smoke is a social vulnerability issue, and tried to model if we thought there were places where we could burn successfully and not have an adverse impact on communities, oftentimes rural communities that we knew were most at risk for the impacts of smoke. And generally what that meant is we did walk away from all of our broadcast burning projects, and it caused us to pivot and refocus on what we could do. And one of the things that we could do is we were very fortunate to receive a Great Outdoors Colorado Resilient Communities grant, which is now supporting for the next 2.5 to 3 years, a 5-person pile burn squad and fuels treatment. The squad is focused on the Big Thompson and the Cache La Poudre watersheds. And so I really just want to take a moment and reach out to any of the potential partners on the call today. if you've got pile burning projects or fuels treatment project needs in either the Big Thompson or the Cache La Poudre, please reach out to me directly. We have the ability to support partners and help them get their work done. Next slide. So one of the things, or a number of the things that we really were able to do, despite not being able to actually put broadcast fire on the ground, is we were really able to focus on a number of capacity building projects. And so one project that we focused on was with Fire Learning Network support, trying to put together pile burning cooperatives. And the idea of the pile burning cooperative was to take the prescribed burn association model used extensively on the Great Plains and the Southeast and refocus it on the smaller acreage private landowners in the kind of Ponderosa Belt, Wooey area of the Front Range. And the idea was to really leverage the excellent work that DFPC has done and their certified burner program and really bring it to the private landowner, help them get trained, and then help them work together with their neighbors to burn their piles. And the idea here is that we hope to see these pop-up co-ops where we'll have neighborhoods where they work together for maybe 2 or 3 winters, and then we expect that those co-ops may go away, but hopefully the next co-op will pop up in the next subdivision or area. So the photo here is from the pile building workshop that we did in conjunction with Big Thompson Watershed Coalition and the Coalition for the Poudre River Watershed. Another thing that we focused on in terms of capacity building was working with wildlands restoration volunteers, and we were able to put together a 100% outdoors, hands-on S212, hopefully making more piles for more burning in the future. And then next slide. And so looking forward into 2021, again, I really want to acknowledge that we do nothing alone. And we've been just really fortunate to have so much partner support. So looking forward, both with our GOCO funding, Nature Conservancy Colorado, and then the U.S. Forest Service and CPRW, we're looking to hopefully get back to burning this spring and certainly this fall. You know, we've done our assessment and we think we can operate safely and minimize our smoke impacts. And so the photo here on the left is actually up in the Elkhorn Creek area. The red is the Elkhorn escape. So doing pile burning in that Elkhorn drainage right up against the periphery of where the escape was, and kind of working with those communities and really leveraging the excellent work that many of the members of this call have done in that landscape, and trying to get some pile burning done, as well as some roadway thinning to provide some additional kind of operational opportunities. And then lastly, on the right is other areas where we look to work this spring throughout the state. And excited, hopefully this fall, to get down into the southwestern corner of the state and do some broadcast burning down there. So thank you again for the opportunities.
All right, thank you, Dave. Well, I'm going to hand this off to Rod Moraga to close us out today. Thank you, everybody, and all the presenters today, and all their excellent information they've shared with us. And Rod, take it away. Still muted.
Okay. I kept getting a message to say that I could unmute myself every time I tried to unmute myself. So, technology. Anyway, want to say thank you to all the presenters. I think this was a very successful workshop. I certainly got a lot out of it. There was a lot of things that I've been curious about for the last year. One of the reasons that I wanted to see this was I wanted to understand how all the COVID will impact and had impacted our ability to put fire back on the landscape. And I think we learned a lot about the different challenges that the agencies had and what the plans are going forward, which is of course the most important part of this. You know, the individual presenters all gave us different aspects that are really important to us. Great case study on the success of prior management in terms of reducing wildfire. Obviously, Lisa, with the weather and the forecasting that we all need to plan ahead. And then, of course, Gabe, you know, everyone has said this to you, but we'll say it again. Really do appreciate your willingness to be open and talk about this. And I unfortunately am in your club and have lost a prescribed burn, and I know what it's like. And there's a lot of second guessing, and you know, if you have any pride in your work, you internalize a lot of it and take a lot of blame. But I think the really important part is that that we are open. We don't hide it. We don't try to make excuses, but instead we accept the fact that when we are using prescribed fire as a tool, there's always an opportunity, unfortunately, that it could escape, and that we just need to own it and learn from it and then share it. And just, you know, that's the best way we can approach anything when we have these incidents. And I guess with that, I would just close out by saying that, you know, we all represent the whole entirety of the prescribed fire group, because any one of us has an incident, makes a mistake, says something inappropriate, it's reflected upon all of us. And so that there is a big responsibility as fire practitioners. You know, it's not something you should ever take lightly. You should be very humbled by it and take every time you go out to burn as a very serious and important, you know, part of the larger land management process. So finally, I'll say that the council's here to support you all. We meet quarterly and we discuss issues that we think are important to the prescribed fire community, but the only way we know what is important is for you all to give us feedback. So it's been mentioned a few times, we've got an after presentation survey, but also we have our website. You can go there, click on the contact us button, and give us more in-depth input on what you'd like to see in the future and how we can help support you better. So with that, I would say thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rod, and thank you, everybody. Thank you, all the presenters. Have a good day, and this will be posted up on the Southern Rockies Fire Science Network YouTube channel. Link there is in the chat box from Ty.